But I want to move to Ukraine because we heard the conversation that the president had with Vladimir Putin, the phone conversation where Putin didn't agree to any meaningful negotiation that would end this war in Ukraine. As President Trump has admitted, Vladimir Putin is taking him for a ride. Now, we have a bipartisan bill in the Senate that's led by Lindsey Graham. It has 80 sponsors. I understand that the House members are ready to take this up on a discharge petition if we pass it out of the Senate. How much longer until we rein Putin in? And are you prepared to support that sanctions bill that Graham and Blumenthal and 78 other members of the Senate support?
Well, let me answer your last question first, and that is about the bill. We obviously can't control what Congress does, and we've told the Russians this. Not now, 6-8 weeks ago. I believe, Senator Shaheen, you were involved in a conversation that made it clear to the Russians what would happen if there was no progress made. And that's been repeated multiple times. I would also make this point, and it's important. Every single sanction, not one sanction has been lifted on the Russians. Every single sanction that was in place under the previous administration remains in place. So this idea we've given up leverage, well, we have the same leverage today that we had under the previous administration.
Well, now, Mr. Secretary, I would argue that the leverage that we've given up is taking NATO membership off the table, taking away a commitment to continue to help the Ukrainians with intelligence sharing and with military equipment and arms that they need to help fight this war.
Well, that continues. There was a pause for 1 week. All of that was restarted.
That was intelligence sharing, though, but it doesn't cover the equipment and arms.
Oh, absolutely. That program has not been rescinded. They continue to receive armaments from the United States.
And we continue to fund what the Ukrainians need as the president, and are you prepared to pass another supplemental bill to support them?
Well, that's a different decision. That's a different question. That's not up for me to decide. The White House would have to make a determination about whether to come to Congress for a supplemental. But everything that's been approved and congressionally appropriated is ongoing. In fact, to the extent that the Ukrainians have asked for anything additional, what they've asked for is air defenses, Patriot units, which frankly we don't have. But we are working closely with our NATO allies. There are NATO allies that do have some batteries of Patriot missiles that they could provide or transfer over to the Ukrainians to defend, for example, the airspace of Kyiv and other places. And we've been encouraging in that front and working alongside our partners there to get deliveries of some of these systems. As you can imagine, none of these countries want to give up their Patriot systems either. But we can't make them fast enough, and part of the challenge we have in Ukraine is that munitions are being expended substantially faster than the ability of the broader West, not just us, but the West, to produce them. Now, that said, on the issue of Ukraine, here's what we can all agree on. There is no military solution to this crisis.
Right.
It will have to end in a negotiated settlement. And the fundamental challenge we have in Ukraine is this. Russia wants what they do not currently have and are not entitled to, and Ukraine wants what they cannot regain militarily. And that's been the crux of the challenge.
I don't disagree with that at one level, but on the other hand, what Vladimir Putin is doing now is playing for time, and he's playing this president like a fiddle. And the longer he plays it, the more opportunity he has to gain territory in Ukraine, and the harder it's going to be to get him to the table. What we need to do is to put pressure on Vladimir Putin in every way we can to ensure that we can get them to the negotiating table.
Well, I disagree with this playing with a fiddle analogy, because the truth of the matter is when Vladimir Putin woke up this morning, he had the same set of sanctions on him that he's always had since the beginning of this conflict, and Ukraine was still getting armaments and shipments from us and from our allies, and the European Union is about to impose additional sanctions, and the U.S. is looking for no Patriot batteries to be able to transfer from other NATO nations into Ukrainian hands. And what the president's trying to do is end a war. He's trying to end a bloody, costly war that neither side can win, and people are dying every single day. And so, but this notion that, what has Putin gained throughout this? He hasn't gotten a single concession. He hasn't gotten a single sanction lifted.
And the more time he gets without additional pressure on Russia, the more incentive he's got to continue to gain territory and continue to play for time. But I want to just get to a final question because my time is running out, and that is, I recently wrote a letter to you about the issuance of executive orders on thousands of Afghan allies. These are people who fought alongside our military during the war in Afghanistan. They've been stranded in Qatar and Albania and Pakistan and Afghanistan. These are individuals who have been vetted already. They're ready to travel to the United States. And the question I have is this administration going to allow them to come to the United States as it promised? Because unless we're willing to keep our commitments to those people who were willing to fight and die alongside of us, then how can we ever ask people to do that again?
Yeah, a couple points. Some of those are I think the issues that is getting mixed up here is whether we are going to pay for them to fly to the United States once a visa is issued, or whether they have to find their own transportation to the U.S. So there's two separate topics: our payment to move people forward, but also the issuance of the visas. And when that is still going through an internal review as to who is going to be allowed in, there's been a review of the vetting process that's been used. Frankly, there have been some errors found in the previous vetting process that we're concerned about, and I'm separating out from that audience people who we have closely vetted because we've been working alongside them for many years with regards to their service alongside our intelligence forces or special operators on the ground from the broader. Remember, they're also bringing dependents with them. And so there were some concerns early on about freezing or slowing down this program until we could determine whether we were properly vetting people to come towards the United States. And that process is ongoing, and I think we'll have more concrete answers for you, which I know is not satisfactory at this moment, but we've obviously had a lot going on. But this is something that we've heard a lot from both our DoD partners and others in the intelligence community, and we're working to make progress on that.
I'm out of time, but just to clarify, on last week, Secretary Noem announced that temporary protected status, which I understand is not exactly the same, but for over 8,000 Afghans would end on July 12th. Many of those people are people, again, who fought and died alongside of our men and women in the military. And for us to send them back to sure death at the hands of the Taliban is just not what they were promised when they agreed to fight with us. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen. Senator Ricketts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Rubio, welcome. The United States is at its most dangerous time in our history since World War II. And we know, we can see what Russia's done in Europe. We know the increasing aggression of communist China, Iran, North Korea. I want to hit upon Iran real quickly here. As you know, this is a theocracy that's got brutal mullahs and corrupt military. They chant death to America, death to Israel. You've had 4 rounds of negotiations with them so far, and I think you framed it best when you said earlier this month they have to walk away from sponsoring terrorists, they have to walk away from helping Houthis, they have to walk away from building long-range missiles that have no purpose to exist other than having nuclear weapons, and they have to walk away from enrichment. That was your quote earlier. And that enrichment is particularly important, as you've stated, and Steve Witkoff reemphasized over the weekend, the ability to enrich at 3.67% for a civilian program. It only takes a few weeks to get to 90% for a military-grade weapon. Now, what I'd like you to just talk about real briefly is, what are you thinking about when you say they've got to get rid of their nuclear program, they've got to have complete disarmament? Is it still the policy that they cannot be allowed to enrich at all in Iran?
Thank you. Well, obviously, these are ongoing, I hope to be ongoing negotiations, because the alternative would be far worse, in my view, but maybe necessary. But we hope that we can reach an agreement with Iran. So here's the baseline that I've described to everybody on it. If what Iran wants is a civil nuclear program, energy, you know, the ability to develop nuclear energy, there's a model for that multiple countries around the world currently follow. And that allows them to build reactors and then bring in enriched material and use it to generate electricity. And that's a model that will be available to Iran, potentially, if they choose to take it. If, on the other hand, they want to retain enrichment capability. And I just described this because if anyone's watching this or in the future, this can get a little complex. All of you understand it, but for the general public, it's important when you get into the details of this. Once you know how to enrich at any level, all you need is time to be able to enrich at a higher level. And they've already proven the ability to enrich at a higher level. In fact, they have, and are doing so now. In fact, their legislative branch passed a law requiring them to break JCPOA and enrich way beyond, almost well beyond 60%. So you're absolutely right. About 90% of the work of enrichment is getting to that 3.67 level. After that, the rest of it is just a matter of time, not to mention what the gap is from the 20% for medical isotopes, which is the other thing they insist upon. So the Iranian position is that they don't just want energy. They claim that enrichment is a matter of national pride.